Welcome to Boardroom to Backend. This is Haricharan. I'm a tech entrepreneur, startup investor, and someone deeply fascinated by how visionary leaders drive meaningful change to technology. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Ravi Seshadri, a technology leader and innovator whose work is shaping the future of AI driven healthcare. Inspired by biomimicry, Ravi designs intelligent, adaptive systems that evolve and self optimize, much like the natural world itself. With multiple patents, including the personal health operating system and clinical operating system, he's at the forefront of edge AI, agentic AI, and healthcare transformation. His approach isn't just about building technology, it's about ensuring it seamlessly integrates into real world workflows, delivering lasting value to patients, clinicians, and enterprises alike. So, today we are going to deep dive into his philosophy, his work, and the future of AI driven healthcare. Let's get into the conversation. Ravi, very warm welcome to this podcast. It's my pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Hari. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And let me start off by just trying to understand about your journey to start with. So, can you take us back in your history, a moment where which shaped your career today, and like what made you so passionate about technology?
Sure. I want to say like sorry about that. Apologies. So, the philosophy with which I run, I build technology these days. There is a moment in my career I vividly remember became non-negotiable. I was leading a high-profile initiative to develop what we call as always tech guys, we like to come up with terminologies. It's called a bot orchestrator, business object task orchestrator. Essentially an industrial control tower that would connect everything from product design in PLM systems through production execution in MES, right down to the factory floor automation. So I have experience in manufacturing, healthcare, education, finance. So I worked in multiple industries in retail. On paper, it was a brilliant solution, the bot orchestrator. So we spent millions developing the solution with an elegant architecture that would integrate with these traditionally siloed platforms. Because if you remember those days, the PLM systems or enterprises, MES systems or middle office, and factory automation systems are at the factory floor level. The execution was flawless, but when the implementation came, the response was almost absolute silence. Nobody said anything bad, nobody said anything good. When we went and asked, the factory managers saw that as an extra work. The system operators in the MES, they had their existing workarounds. The vendors at that time, UGS, coincidentally, they acquired the company. But UGS wasn't very keen about integrating because they had no incentive to adopt the new data standards we built. That failure taught me something very profound, right? A technically perfect solution, because everybody builds cool technology, a technically perfect solution that doesn't solve a burning problem that people actually care about is an expensive hobby project. So I at least thought when I was leading that initiative, I'm building something cool, but it didn't generate enough material value for the consumers. Since then, my approach is inverted. I start every initiative by deeply understanding the human and the business friction. I measure success not by system uptime or feature completeness, but by tangible value we create. Or, when you are in an entrepreneurial world, revenue generated is one of the metric or problems eliminated, right? So technology that matters isn't just functional to me, it's transformational in ways the users can actually feel it, right?
Great, great. So, is that what you share that you draw a lot of inspiration by observing the biomimicry, right? Like a part of it. So, you try to kind of design systems using what nature offers and like how you observe things in nature. So, can you talk a little more about that? Like, how did you actually come across this concept, and how have you adopted that in your work life?
Absolutely. So very early in my career, I shouldn't say very early, like about a decade or 15 years back, one of my friend who invested in a company that was building an enterprise search engine, right? So those days, since Google's invention, everybody was trying to build a search engine, and there was a company here in Dallas, Richardson area, so they were trying to build a search engine for an enterprise. And I started talking to those inventors, and they were talking about different algorithms. So I got introduced into this biomimicry. So if you have heard about what Google did and everybody did, most of the genetic algorithms in AI today are inspired by biomimicry, ant colony optimization, particle swarm optimization, bat optimization. So a different type of bat colony optimization, how bat actually makes sounds that actually tells you where to go. And when ant actually uses pheromones to be able to identify where the closest path to the food is for the rest of the ants. So it's kind of interesting areas where a lot of the search algorithms were inspired by some of these biomimicry items. That's how I got introduced. And practically, um, we wanted to revolutionize how inventory management is done in the specialty medication space. I looked at different critical. If you look at traditional pharmaceutical supply chains, are quite rigid, largely built around linear forecasting and batch ordering, but patient needs are usually unpredictable, right? Treatment protocols changes based on response. That means like you don't want to buy items that you meant to keep just because there is a pattern that says, and it's not like shoe stores because these drugs are super expensive.
Mm.
So I observed this concept called mycelial network. You can Google them.
Yeah.
It's called basically mycelial is a fungi that it transfers nutrients from nutrient-rich trees and plants to trees and plants that need nutrients. So there is actually a network that request energy. Water slash sugar slash other nutrients, and then this mycelial fungi will be able to transfer based on the needs on the other side and from the trees that actually have surplus. So if we can create a more dynamic distribution platform optimization algorithm that actually looks at more more constraints, including because of weather, a particular location might be closed, and they might have some supply, but that is not being used, and most of these medications expire. So, looking at how mycelial fungi actually transfer energy between trees and plants, we said, hey, let's use GNN, graphical neural network, and other types of constraint algorithms to be able to optimize the supply chain. So that's one of the things that we have been actively working on. So we can reduce, our hypothesis is we can reduce emergency transfers by over 50% and reduce medication waste by over 75% because that's one of the big challenges in healthcare. Uh, the big challenges in healthcare, supply chain, so specialty medications, especially which are super expensive. Uh,
That's very, very interesting. I think very few leaders have been able to kind of bring that to life, right? And I mean, it's so important for one to kind of recognize and draw inspiration from industries outside where they are working and bring it to their own industry. It rarely happens, right? We are all drowned into our own technology innovations and we just keep running the same race, but we do not pay much attention to kind of observe like how some of the other industries are innovating and see if there are some best practices that we can bring in. And this is really out of box thinking, I would say, and kudos to you for doing that, and thanks
Thanks.
for sharing that example. So, so in the same manner, if we today zoom out, what do you think in nature has figured out that AI research is probably still struggling with? Can you think of something that like in nature that you would say that it is happening, but still the AI or AI research might still have not been able to kind of absorb from nature? Anything?
I mean, very simple. I mean, if you look at your neural network, right? I mean, our own systems, the ability for us to respond. That's where I'm excited about what Edge AI can bring to this market. But if you look at a neural response, when we call it muscle memory, sometimes somebody pinches, the pain comes. We are unable to still build systems that are able to respond in a localized fashion, right? It's still more, like it or not, centralized response kind of systems. So I'd love to see how intelligence can be transferred there. There are a lot of efforts. Remote patient monitoring have built something like that. And on the retail side, how do you actually push decisions to the edge and then influence optimization? So we have tried different things, but still, I'd say we are not there as much as we should be, right? Because the devices are getting better nowadays, so I believe we will get there. Purely looking at afferent neurons. I mean, if you look at the clinical operating system patent I have, so one of the inspirations we drew is how information is taken back and forth to the central brain. So called afferent neurons and different type of neurons and what kind of effect. So it has been how long we have been around, at least 50,000 years.
Yeah.
Right? The neural system has been documented for at least 200, 300 years, and still we haven't found. I mean, obviously, everybody calls the digital nervous system and all this thing, but we haven't able to mimic, right? The biomimetic approach of mimicking a neural network that how our system functions to the real world. So it'll be interesting to see. I hope I can contribute something sooner than later, because it's not about just an idea. It's about the devices and everything that needs to come together to make something like that work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and you have led really large scale transformations across the industries. So, what are some of the key principles that guide your decision making whenever you are approaching some massive, complex transformations or initiatives?
Um, Give me one sec. I mean, I actually took some notes on some of the large scale transformation that I did.
Sure.
You want the long version or the short version?
I'm good for both. So, yeah, we can dig deep into anything that really is interesting and that's going to be helpful for our listeners too.
Sure. I mean, there are different challenges, like when you're trying to use large scale transformation, because it's most often they fail, right? I mean, sometimes when I've worked on $500 million transformations versus $25 million transformations, I mean, different kinds of transformations, but having worked across healthcare, retail, supply chain, manufacturing, I, over time, just for the benefit of this conversation, over time, I've tried to take three different core principles, right, in every major initiative I work with. So I look at first principles thinking, because this is now being, in the last at least few years, it has been popularized by Elon Musk. So if you look at a critical, this is critical because when I tackled a failing retail supply chain optimization project, the conventional wisdom was how centralized optimization. I don't know if you remember those days, like 10, 15, 20 years back, the optimization algorithms ran at the center and they decided how much items you want to have in your store in the corner of, let's say, Irving, right? If you had a retail store in Irving, what will be the items in stock is actually the optimization is run with, let's say, Kroger or any big chain, Payless Shoes or Best Buy. So that's decided by some central optimization algorithms. One of the challenges you look at it, if you look down and say, hey, if you break it down by first principles, that means what is the problem? The problem is some locations has more inventory of that item over a long period of time. Some stores do not have the multi-channel retailing came after. But when you look at the optimization process, if you look down to the core of it, the biggest challenge was The franchisees slash people who run the local stores are not able to exert influence on what type of items they want to store based on the trends and demands that they see, right? Because most of the centralized algorithms had a challenge. So when I looked at that one, applied first principle, understood the problem. So we came up with this concept called retail planning paradigm, right? I mean, distributed retail planning paradigm, where the lowest node had an influence on what type of items that they want to store in that that created more value because the franchisees were able to exert influence rather than it's a hybrid optimization because you want to run certain central optimization as well as this. And I anchor everything on value creation and execution metrics. I've seen enough successful, enough failed transformations that delivered on time and budget but generated zero business impact, right? We have shifted from ranking implementation milestones rather than saying, okay, we did 25%, 30%, 40%. So we went with measurable, tangible outcomes. That means running a large scale healthcare claims projects, and you say, hey, what is our core goal? Our core goal is to be able to process X amount of claims in a given a specific amount of time because that generates value for the customer. So look at measurable and tangible outcomes, and then from a industry perspective, whether it's inventory or in healthcare payer and network claims has been one of the barriers for them to be able to service. And in the retail side, how do we actually measure how fast you can move an item from one retail store to another retail store if you're doing multi-channel retailing? So look at measurable outcomes. The third thing is, unfortunately, you have to be, I mean, not unfortunately, it is important for us to be adaptable. Right? The marketplace changes dramatically mid transformation. When you're running a 10-year transformation project, things change. We ran a large transformation project for JCPenney and Payless Shoes, and midway through that, the economic conditions changed. That means the goals with which we started the transformation initiative and then the assumptions we made are not the same, right? So we'll have to, rather than stubbornly sticking to the rigid plans, we have to design things a little bit modularly, right? And reprioritize as conditions change. This adaptive approach will help save implementation and market disruption as it occurred, allowing us to pivot quickly where we wanted to pivot. Right? So three principles: from first principles thinking, value creation, and then adaptive.
I think those are really very, very helpful um, principles, I would say. So I'm sure, like when you are doing so, you also have to kind of constantly look at new technologies that are coming in, right? Like, so how do you actually really assess whether a technology that is coming in is just more like a trend, or really, because you spoke about the value creation, I know you would measure from the same lens of like whether it's going to kind of create value, or how it aligns to your business and all these things. But like, how do you really identify whether the technology is just a trend or something that's going to kind of be more impactful for the work that you are doing?
You know, I don't want to lie. I'm as excited about technology as anybody else, right?
Right.
So
We are all, yeah,
I'm a technologist, right? First,
yeah,
um, it's an interesting question. Let me think through, right? When I think, let me
sure,
make sure that I just don't want to give a vague answer, right?
true. No, I know. I think that's a point that I mean that we all uh, kind of stare on a daily basis. Right? We, being technology is savvy in one side, like you always get attracted to the new things that are happening, and you also are having this FOMO in that's going on in your mind. Like, okay, are we going to miss this curve, or
Exactly. So
so?
I'll tell you what. When first in 2008 2009 time frame, because I've been ardent, I follow technology as deeply as I can.
Yeah,
When 2000 2008 9 time frame, the Bitcoin blockchain was becoming a thing.
yeah,
So I've been following that for a couple of years, and in 2011, you can go back and Google my patents. I mean, in 2011, I had filed at least 3 patents on how blockchain can create value for, in reducing because claims fraud was a big thing. We were
Yeah.
working on a project with CMS, Medicare, Medicaid, and they were losing billions of dollars. And I was working also with the NHS UK. Some of the challenges that they all had, but how do we? NHS UK had a different problem. It's a centralized system. There is not a whole lot of claim fraud. US there is claim fraud. NHS UK, we were doing this project called 100,000 Genomes, where the ability for you to get as much information about a single person to be able to extract certain insights from that was super hard, right? Because you have EMRs, you have different systems, bringing data together. Even in NHS, it is not that easy. So I was super excited and started following blockchain, and then created quite a few patents, right? But that enthusiasm had led me down to some expensive rabbit holes, right? I mean, uh, through these experiences, if you look at it, I got excited about augmented reality, so I filed several patents on that. I'm a big fan of pharmaceutical waste. Why we should manufacture. I don't know if you notice, if you buy an aspirin from Amazon today, if you go back and look at that serial number of that aspirin or the product code, and go online and search for it, you can see that it hopped from buy.com in 2001 to somewhere else, Walgreens, then to Kroger, then to Target, and in 2025 it showed up in Amazon's because they all buy, right? When something is being sold, but the efficacy of these drugs over time wear out. I
Right.
mean, when you buy an aspirin from a store which was manufactured in 2001, you won't see the same effect as the aspirin that was manufactured 3 years back. But some of these things you can go back and look. So I was super excited about how blockchain can give you transparency in certain things. That means instead of taking one pill, the system automatically advises you to take two because the efficacy is lost a little bit because of the storage that it has been around. So I was super excited. But it all led me to expensive rabbit holes. Like I personally invested in enough companies, enough startups, enough blockchain-based solutions that I couldn't find a customer, right? I mean, or otherwise the customers weren't super thrilled about. Some of them are intentional. So I still then, 3 is my favorite number. For the sake of our conversation, to be pragmatic, I've developed a 3-question framework.
Okay.
One, is it solving a fundamental problem, or is it a shiny distraction? With blockchain, I initially solved it as solving the fundamental problem of fragmented, institution controlled, whatever, right? In the healthcare space, it's medical records. In the education space, it's your credentialing. So every industry had a sensitive, banks also, right? In financial markets, you also see banks holding all your information. It's very hard to get. So I saw in the supply chain space, in the healthcare space, in the education space, that somebody controlled the centralized way of doing things. So control medical records, control education records. Years later, I realized the core problem was more about incentives and standards, right? And then the underlying, think of this as a glorified database, right?
Right.
Um, and also, when evaluating AR/VR recently, I forced myself to clearly articulate, hey, what particular problem that we are trying to solve. So, the first thing is this technology solving a fundamental problem, or is it a shiny distraction? Before I build anything or invest, that's how I think. Second, is it composable? Because one of the challenges that we see is siloed technologies create more work for people,
Yeah.
and then if you introduce one more, that's one more thing that I have to do. Can it fit my enterprise main infrastructure, right? The when we call about the app fatigue, how many apps do you use in your iPhone? But you have probably 100 apps.
Yeah.
On a day-to-day side, you probably have use for only 3 or 4.
Right.
So like that, right? Is it composable? Does it fit? When we are talking about enterprise solutions, so does it fit, right? Is it a composable technology for me? The last thing is, does it create intrinsic value independent of the hype cycle? Right? Measurable benefits for the business, would they pay for it? With AI, if you look at, we have been rigorous about quantifying exactly how much time it saves clinicians or how it improves diagnostics accuracy, right? Not just claiming some transformation, right? So, for example, if you look at the scribe, when the AI scribes are able to document and then also annotate certain things when the doctor says certain stuff over time, it has created significant value for the physicians and saves time for them, because otherwise what happens is as they dictate, they send it to a scribe, somebody scribes it and bring it back. They have to validate that and sign it. Now it's almost, by the time they finish dictating, your AI scribe is able to help them. So that creates meaningful and intrinsic value for them. So fundamental problem, is it solving a fundamental problem? Is it composable? Does it create intrinsic value? So that's a framework I use these days to evaluate technology before I think of adopting them.
Right, and I'm sure like these patterns, these fundamental, principles that you are using to evaluate the technology, is applicable to any industry, right?
Of course, it's across industry. Yeah.
Right, So I know we are all excited about AI and all of that stuff, but apart from AI, if you were to kind of think of one technology in the last 5 years that has excited you the most, right, or like that holds a lot of promise to the work that you are doing, what would that be? Like, and why would you say that that's the technology?
Um, if you think about, unfortunately, the potential of the next 10 years, right? That's what you're asking.
Right.
Um, my big bet is some of the more practical AI things, right? I mean, unfortunately, fortunately, I mean, quantum is too early.
Yeah.
So if you purely look at the technology framework, uh, the three most exciting things to me is edge computing,
Okay.
quantum, and then different flavors of AI. So if you think about what they call as neuromorphic computing, or there is a newer neural computing infrastructure that are coming out. I mean, those are going to be a lot more practical, because a lot of the AI, are, I mean, I would say most of the machine learning work is statistics on steroids, right? So technically, that's what it is. It's looking at pattern recognition.
Yeah.
But if you look at this more newer approaches of neuro, I believe, right, where you take patterns and you also take certain type of neural, because you're not able to create a lot of explainable AI, and so accountability becomes a problem, and that's why AI is still not as perverse as. But as we say it, if you look at the documentation system for meetings today, the scribes that we talked about for the doctors, so it's getting, I mean, it's becoming part of our everything that we do. So personally, from the technologies I'm following, from and a lot of other stuff that I'm following, I'm most excited about this neural, because if you look at autonomous driving, as well as some of the energy saving techniques that they're going to use in spaceships. I mean, I've been an ardent follower of space too, so I love that technology. What Elon Musk is doing, instead of, I was hoping they would go small instead of going big. So I mean, you know what? Most exciting thing that I would say is how much we could do something like uh, asteroid mining, right? I mean, because a lot of young companies are coming out these days that are trying to do different things. Because if you look at the amount of certain minerals that are available, phosphates, for example, that are available near Earth asteroids, the
Yeah.
Van Holt zone, they are super rich, but it is too expensive for us to leave the atmosphere, go there, mine, and bring something back. It's super expensive. So I'm looking forward to some. I've been reading a lot of techniques. I mean, happy to happy to shed some light. But
Yeah.
outside of pure tech, that seems to be an area that, hey, is there a better way? Decarbonization is something I personally invested. I've followed a lot, but there is the scientific. I mean, again, I'm not a what do you call environmental scientist, so I only read, and I only sometimes when people come back and give their ideas, and I see if it is interesting for me, so I'm part of that. in venture, and I find like it goes nowhere because decarbonization is a really hard thing to do. So what is the next frontier for us? And it seems to be like in the space side. So I'm looking forward to innovations on that one. So I read a lot. I haven't invested in anything because there was nothing available. I mean, at that level. I mean, at my level to invest. But I'm looking forward to that technology as the next big frontier because that's going to be a beautiful milestone whenever we achieve it.
Sure, sure. And in the same lens, if you are looking at the biggest misconception about AI in healthcare today, what is that? Like, because you are a practitioner yourself, so you know uh, close to the ground, like what are some of the misconceptions that are held about AI in healthcare today?
Oh, the biggest challenge is radiologists, for example, right? They think that now AI is reading radiology images. So they feel like their job is going to be lost, right? The misconceptions are, is it replacing a human? Even physicians, right? Because AI-based diagnosis, whenever you get a certain set of symptoms and pathology results, which is like nothing more than lab results. So if you go to a lab, because today you don't need a physician's script to go get a lab test done. So, for example, if you and I want to go get a men's panel test, you can go and get a men's panel test done and then submit it to an AI, and AI can summarize, based on all the thing that they have taught the AI, it can summarize and say, hey, you need to care about A, B, C. That principally amounts to diagnosis, right? So both the physicians, there is a misconception how much of this AI can become a diagnostic tool. That means the need for the physician now becomes like our education administrators, like examiners, right? That's all they do, right? At the end of the day, you have a legal system that says AI cannot write prescription scripts, or they cannot perform surgeries. Now you need a physician to do that. So there is a lot of misconception about how AI can eliminate certain roles, right? But what I see personally is when I educate them, because I've also built something like that in the specialty or oncology space, for example, most of these physician offices, in the retina or oncology, most of these physician offices, there's roughly 1 is to 10 or 1 is to 15 nurse to patient ratio. Right? That's almost unmanageable, especially if you have to follow up with them. I didn't understand a lot of these things. So it can help them, but the misconception today is, hey, it's doing more and it is not knowledgeable enough to do that more. So is it going to replace me? So that's the fear that people have a lot in healthcare. It is changing with the younger doctors' willingness to adapt, but the adoption, irrespective of even the younger ones, the adoption is like the AI scribe that they're willing to take, anything that reduces their work, they're willing to take. But a lot about, just like any other general theory, then they think accuracy is one thing they're worried about. Also, I recently was in a panel with an oncologist on AI and how it can help oncology side. Precision medicine is a big area, but overall, they don't want it to go to a point where it does the diagnosis and the physician is basically doing only the service, right? So that seems to be the fear overall in healthcare.
Got it, got it. And so, what's the hardest part there? Like, I understand it's probably the concerns that are there in their minds that okay, it's going to kind of replace them, or like they feel that it's not still at a place where it can really be of helping them in a meaningful manner. So, so from the healthcare organization standpoint of view, is it more about the education that they have to do, or like what are some of the initiatives that you are seeing that's happening there? And
The challenge is a lot of these, there's dime a dozen AI companies that come in and then tell you that they can do something, right?
right,
It seems to create, for example, if you look at genomic results, I'll just explain the problem and I'll tell you what would work for the physicians,
right,
specifically in the healthcare side.
Yeah.
right? I see the same problem in the education side, right? Because teachers are looking at this and saying the instruction-based approach has to change. So let's stick to healthcare first.
Yeah.
So if you look at how do you analyze genomic information to be able to recommend to the physician what are the best treatment for that patient based on the genomic profile of that patient, and the mappings are not that trivial, right? There is not enough data generated so far to say, hey, there is some scientific evidence about, so who's the curator of this information? The physicians are the curator of this information. Over time, as machines learn, and then physicians continue to document, hey, if you see BRCA2 gene expression, BRCA2 gene is a breast cancer gene, male or female, it doesn't matter. So, popularly called as breast cancer gene, but BRCA2 gene can actually have a mutation. That means these are all the potential treatments available for that patient to counter that effect of that mutation to any of the genetic diseases that they might get.
Yeah.
But when they come back and say that, there is not a whole lot of clinical evidence that these things work. So it would require a lot of collaboration from these science-led companies to be able to come back, because there are pure science companies, there are AI-based science companies, and then there are AI companies. That's a spectrum we are talking about.
Right.
Pure science companies understand exactly the human science, biological sciences, and they produce correlations between different aspects of your system. The AI-based science are, that's basically science companies on steroids who's using AI to be able to come back and give the correlations. AI companies are basically trying to build like pattern matching for certain stuff based on literature available publicly and or generated by. So physicians are not able to say, hey, what is this company? What is this technology trying to deliver? What this AI-based technology is trying to deliver? That means it would require a lot of education from the AI pioneers to the physicians to be able to say, hey, why this would be helpful for them, for what is the big problem you're trying to solve in healthcare? If we do AI right in healthcare, in my opinion, what is the biggest problem you can try to solve? Access to treatments. That's and speed at which you can provide that treatment. Those are the two big problems,
Right.
right? So before we come to financial toxicity,
Yeah.
it means like treatments are super expensive, and how do you reduce the cost of treatment? Pharmaceutical companies are trying to, again, use AI to be able to come up with compounds faster than what they can do otherwise, because it takes $1 billion to come up with a product today, medical product, couple of billion dollars. That means if they have to go back and earn that $1 billion back, they try to come up with 10 products, only one makes it to the market, and then they have to cover the cost of R&D of all these 10 products. That's why your pharmaceutical products are expensive, right? Other countries usually copy. That means once your patent expires, I can make generics. That's a different way of solving problem. But pharmaceutical companies are now trying to use AI to say, can I reduce the time it takes, right, to come up with a new compound? So from a physician perspective, they're already super knowledgeable about how to do diagnosis based on what they see as lab results and some of the observations they physically make. And AI can probably help them. But today, the way that it is explained is the AI companies are not usually deep science companies, and that means their ability to relate to the physician about how this would. There are some smarter physicians who are embracing these things, but general populace of physicians are still scared because one, they are worried about liability, because the accountability, it diffuses, right? Hey, is this the AI model? Whoever built the AI model, do I go after them if it makes a wrong disposition? Do I go after the programmer? Do I go after the user who actually adopted that AI to make that decision? That's a big challenge for them today, right?
Yeah.
To
Where
be able
does
to
the
say, hey, this is an enabler for you, you will be able to use it and quickly come to that conclusion, right? Especially in the absence of a lot of clinical documentation in the context of a particular patient. So it would require a lot of education and then bringing them along this path. And it's hard because by clinicians are super busy.
Right.
That means it is a challenge that I've been trying to solve for now nearly 10 years. And we have to continue to invest time and then educate them and then try to see what would be the highest value for them to start with. That's where the AI scribes and all these things are creating value that are peripheral to their day-to-day work, but important for them in the context of revenue generation. Now, how can we create value in the context of clinical diagnosis? So it'll be there soon, but it would take quite a bit of education. Sorry, long answer to a
No, no,
question.
no. I think this was super helpful actually. See, the goal is like for people to understand like when the rubber meets the road, like what's the fact, right? Like when
Yep.
all of us are so much hyped about AI and its possibilities and all those things. So it really needs somebody who's a true practitioner of AI in the healthcare to kind of outline what it takes to kind of be successful, even for the AI companies who are trying to kind of develop solutions to that space, or like probably the healthcare organizations who want to kind of bring in AI. How should they actually evaluate? I think this was really helpful.
If you think about like and simply talk about drug forecasting, I mean you brought up a really good point about a real practitioner versus so
Yeah,
9 out of 10 distribution centers in the US use what they I mean a simple moving average as a way to determine how much items they need to keep in stock.
right.
Because anything more complex is it works 90% of the time, right? So I'm good enough. So now AI companies come, they come up with different type of optimization technique, right? And GNN is a very popular optimization technique for inventory management in the AI space. And then they come, they push that, and then you find out you don't have enough data even to be able to use that model to bring the results because a lot of these things are I mean, the practical challenges are dispersed. And if you think about that, then if the degree of complexity goes, the reason I picked inventory management, it's probably the simpler of the problems.
Yeah,
And the degree of complexity grows when you go to clinical diagnosis. You're looking at let's take a disease of genetics, cancer, right? You're looking at pathology results, which basically says, hey, your white blood cells are getting killed, red blood cells are getting killed. You get the blood cells count less. It's how you diagnose, right? And then you have your radiology images that talks about tumor-based cancers. Not every cancer is like if you have liquid cancer, you cannot see it. You will see it by certain lab chemical, but if solid cancer, you can see it by radiology images. And now why that cancer is happening. So we have related that instead of anatomical site-based cancer, we have now moved to because we now understand genes causes cancer, right? When a mutation of genes causes cancer. So now move to that. Now there is more complexity than that. Okay, I've got genes are like your hardware.
yeah,
If you never turn down your machine, when the hardware doesn't do anything, right?
yeah,
It lives forever. So there is something equivalent of a software firmware, whatever you want to call, that triggers that. That could be because of so many combinations. So yes, unfortunately, the treatments are only certain things, and there is only. I mean, if a manufacturing, I mean, if a pharmaceutical manufacturer did not produce a drug for that particular condition, then you're out of luck, right? There are other ways of treating yourself, but outside of that. But for an AI to come up with a diagnosis based on now you're talking about complexity of data, a physician is well trained to look at the key points. AI needs to be trained. So when you come back half baked and it works for one drug, one disease state, right? And there is about, let's say, 170 different cancer types, right? I mean, so now you have to make sure that all the combination that you're reading. So the practical complexity of training AI, getting it, and some of the algorithms that are there, for example, you can cluster anything you want, you can different types of techniques that you're using to do certain things, but advanced AI, neural networks are still little early in the health in the diagnosis space. It's mostly like I ask a question to ChatGPT saying I have a headache, I have a nosebleed, and I've got pain in my ear. Tell me what it is, and it comes up with whatever people have documented online and say, oh, these things mean X, right? A WebMD result, technically.
yeah,
So, feels for the physician, because I work with them every day, For the physician, it feels too primitive, right? Because you're not able to clearly tell me why you came up with that diagnosis.
Right.
Because same set of symptoms, because you're not physically seeing the patient.
Right.
When you see a patient, if their hair in your eyebrows are thinning, it gives them an indication about same set of symptoms that are the lab results comes back with high X, high Y, high Z, whatever, but they see that visually, observation that they make in your face, in your hands. I mean, for diabetic patients, they see the bottom of your legs. So if you see that, then that gives them a different, hey, this is a little subtly different diagnosis than what would have come just by looking at that pattern, right? So we are still scratching the surface in terms of application of AI in healthcare, but apologies. I'm a little passionate about solving healthcare problems, so
Again,
went a little
I think
deeper than I thought.
all of this is really helpful. So, again, just trying to kind of go in the same direction. You mentioned about the Edge AI. So, for the benefit of our audience, if you can explain like how you are seeing Edge AI being a game changer in your world and what it really means, that would be helpful.
Sure. I mean, if you remote patient monitoring has been around for a long time, right?
Right. Yeah.
Today, health gets only attention when you go to doctor visits. Now imagine a intelligent continuous monitoring system. In some form, it is there today with the continuous glucose monitor for diabetes patients, right? But it doesn't make real-time decisions, right? So because I ran a project um, for what do we call as the smart pancreas. Basically, you have a continuous glucose monitor that actually measured your glucose and then told the smart, or otherwise the bionic pancreas, to be able to release insulin only when it is absolutely required. Because technically, if you look at, again, I'm not a doctor, so don't take what I'm saying as a doctor version, just what I learned.
Yeah.
Insulin is not good for you, right? So overdose of insulin is actually going to make your nervous systems weaker. Okay, so generally, so you don't want to pump your body with insulin when in a periodic interval, because sometimes when you inject yourself or you take it in a pill form, you're doing things that are absolutely not necessary sometimes. But so if you think about a continuous glucose monitor and a bionic pancreas, that is edge computing, right? So you have a protocol that says patient didn't eat for the last 6 hours. When the person didn't eat for the last 6 hours, their glucose numbers are low, right? That means you need to do something, or otherwise they add food, they need insulin, so pump insulin. So that type of edge and autonomous system in healthcare would actually super benefit certain chronic conditions, because managing chronic conditions, if you look at the spectrum of healthy to acute, so you want to keep any human being as much as possible on the left side, both for quality of life, and before you think about how do you reduce cost of care, you also think about like quality of life. Once you have certain chronic conditions, you go on the right side. A person with a chronic kidney disease having to do dialysis every other week or whatever, that's painful for them. Just don't think about the money only, right?
Yeah.
For that person going through that experience, it's painful. So if you want to keep everybody on the left side, that means you need personal companions, health companions, right? And unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of us have got genetic dispositions to certain disease states, right? When it happens, we don't know.
Right.
But I'm excited about the edge AI and the what I would call as the autonomous systems that we can build by a combination of devices in yours, right? A bionic pancreas only program is to just release insulin, right? When we tell it to release insulin, of what unit, then you need a monitoring system that actually monitors your glucose condition, then some kind of compute that's available, but the protocol needs to be personalized to you. So let's assume that you and I are two people who have diabetic condition, and this particular instrument set would help both of us, but it doesn't mean that we both get exactly the same amount. It is not like a standard saying, hey, inject 5 ml of insulin. It could be different for you, and it could actually happen when your glucose level goes down, your system might behave a little differently. That means it needs to be programmed very differently than my system. So some kind of edge compute that's available, as close to the patient as possible. Now you have created a truly intelligent, condition-based health monitoring system. And as complex it goes, if people have multiple chronic conditions, then you need a better edge compute. So that's why I'm really excited in the context of healthcare. I personally think the edge computing will make a lot of sense. When the earlier version of that is remote patient monitoring, which actually send everything to a centralized server, where something is processed and sent back. But that means the decisions can be slow, and it does not really impact, because patients need decisions done quickly. Even if it is sending an alert to them to go to emergency room and or call their doctor and or take a pill or whatever it is that the action needs to be, it needs to happen real fast.
And so, in combination with the agentic AI also coming in, probably with
Exactly.
the AGI, I think it should get even better, right? Like, and
Yeah.
be able to kind of.
I mean, I'm very excited about the intersection of, that's what I call as autonomous, right? Agentic to me is autonomous. Like my protocol, I may have high blood pressure and high cholesterol and diabetes. That means the protocol that needs to execute for me will be different than the protocol you execute. If you create a agents, then the agent should be able to converse with each other to say, hey, by the way, I mean, this patient has got both chronic diabetes as well as blood pressure. That means I'm talking to my blood pressure patient to say, I'm taking an action. Is there an impact? And it should be able to give. So I'm excited the combination of, that's what I call as autonomous system. To me, that's agentic AI. So the edge and agentic AI would be a phenomenal influence in the future of that. I'm excited about that personally.
Awesome. No, just shifting gears from technology to more of your leadership and overall strategy part of it. So, uh, in your mind, like, what separates an average technology leader from a great one?
Oh, it's an interesting question. I've got a lot of ego. I think I'm a great technology leader. Well, but, so reflecting on my personal journey, right, with both success and failures, I believe what separates and what we call as a great leader from a not so great leader is the one that focuses on outcomes rather than technology itself, right? I mean, most of the leaders optimize for technical excellence, right? Building robust systems, they implement cutting edge technologies, how to efficiently run these things, but these are necessary but not sufficient, right? So great technology leaders usually understand the technology is merely vehicle for creating value, anchoring every decision to be able to measurable outcomes, right? Whether it's improving the healthcare context patient experience
Yeah.
or accelerating time to market in a retail setting, enhancing operational efficiency, or even enabling new business models in some cases, right? So most of the leaders speak the language of technology, while great leaders usually have seen, especially technically great leaders, speak the language of business. Right? Hey, you need to understand if you are going to. That's why, like, it's very hard for people to go across in this. I mean, purely dumb luck. I worked in 4 different industries, but it's super hard once you get to an executive status in as a CTO or a CIO of a fine fintech company, for you to transition to a technology company. A lot of people fail, right? Some people just are subdued, then they don't take a lot of actions, and then they roll with the junior staff who actually have been there 20 years, and then they're smart people, right? Most of them didn't come to that CIO, CTO level without being smart. So they take, but they become average leaders in those instances because they are unable to relate the impact from a business outcome perspective that that technology creates. So my personal reflecting on my own journey, that's how I feel, right? When you're talking about pure tech, people who are innovators, man, just like the science companies, right? The pure tech companies that focus on, right? Hey, you invent the next new technology for, man, it might do something cool, right? That's different. That's not the technology leader I'm talking about. I'm talking about like technology leaders who are probably, I mean, ingested in the enterprises, right? They are all part of a large enterprise. So the ones that are great are usually very cognizant of transformative opportunities for business and then how that technology enables them. That would be my experience, based on my experience.
Sure, sure. So, again, from the same context, like this, understanding and this leadership style and philosophy, has it been for you right from your career, or like was there any moment of failure or a setback, which kind of probably shaped your thought in this direction?
So one of the biggest failures I've had, the most formative failure, happened when I led a major reverse supply chain company. Right, I was asked to lead. I was young, so between Microsoft and Safeguard Scientific, they invested roughly $22 million retooling and ERP. They basically said, a first of a kind, and supply chain everybody understands, reverse supply chain. We want to build a platform that allows, easy transfer of resources back to the manufacturer for raw materials and all these things. Because one of the challenges you had was, how do you create efficient use of, because raw materials becoming scarce for certain things, to reuse becoming a big theme. So here's a reverse supply chain platform. So we looked at it. We said, okay, we're going to go live in 9 months. So we went and acquired an ERP company and then made it into the, if not the first, the earliest SaaS-based solution. Okay, technically ambitious at that time. It was 25 years back. Despite everything we had, when we went live, the hosting environment couldn't handle all our performance requirements, and features that looked impressive in demos did not really work in real world usage. Because it's a SaaS-based platform, most of the customers canceled because we said we are going to go month to month on a SaaS-based. The first month we had a revenue of something like $800,000. The second month the revenue was $20,000, right? So I don't exactly remember the numbers, but kind of sort of that way, right? So the company shut down 9 months later. A viable business is what we thought for years couldn't survive the impact of a failed transformation. I fell in love with the technical vision without understanding the user needs or infrastructure limitations, solving what seemed rather an impressive but a grand vision that could deliver significant value at that time, because supply chain was never a SaaS-based, right? You're talking about 25 years back. Reverse supply chain didn't exist. So we were creating something. This forever changed my approach. Now I start every project by shadowing users, right? Learning from that moment of failure, understanding the human and human finance and business friction points. So a good enough solution that people actually use creates infinitely more value than a technically perfect solution that sits in use. That's been leading me to champion what we call as minimum viable value, not minimum viable product, right? Minimum viable value, that each product release delivers immediate benefits for my customers.
Got it. Got it. Really, it has been very insightful. So, I know, you have been very passionate about technology, and you are also, keen on investing in other ideas and other businesses. So, what is, what are few businesses or ideas that you are taking bets on, and outside whatever you are doing, and if you are taking bets?
Outside of,
Yeah, whatever you may be doing, if you given a starting point for you, and if you want to kind of invest in two or three startups or business ideas, where do you think that you would be doing that?
oh, sure. I've been super passionate about education, because the model has to change, right? We have to reimagine education for the 21st century. So you and I, coming from India, the rotary side, remembering things is not a big deal these days, right? Because information is abundant, and you have personal AI things that are coming that probably can give you context of a lot of things, as long as you understand the fundamentals, right?
Right.
So education needs to change. So I'm looking for different types of companies that actually could deliver education. So uh, I'm part of this group called Alumni Ventures. So I look for specific, opportunities that actually can change this, uh, delivering education differently. Now, I'm not worried about employability. People will always find employment, some kind of employment, and or governments will protect them, whatever. But I'm
Yeah.
looking to say, hey, if we have to create, just pick. I'm not a doomsday kind of person, but I'm a very optimistic person in life.
Yeah.
I'm a very optimistic person in life, but if you think about like the Earth is not going to exist in 200 years, just like what Musk says. So what would we do differently, right? That would require people to have a very sound education background because you just cannot say, hey, go sit there and imagine. What are you going to imagine, right? So a different kind of education. So I've been looking for investing in some education startups that has got some different ways of delivering education, and that's one area. The second one, like I was telling earlier, I'm a big fan of space. I haven't found any company yet
Yeah.
that is in my, again, financial bracket to invest. So I've spoken to a couple of the even startups that comes out of IIT Chennai because
Okay.
I've got some connections there. So that's an area that I'm looking at. And the third thing, not too exciting. I've always been I forgot, it was 2014, 13, 14 time frame. So we did a kind of a study in Stanford conducted this with Nissan of how mobility is going to change, right? The entire thing. So I'm curious to see what the next evolution for mobility. Self-driving cars are here, Uber is here. So what is the next big, change in the mobility? Because vehicle ownership, because there's a large automotive industry and vehicle ownership is a big deal, right?
Right.
So when you go to a mobility infrastructure that doesn't require you to have vehicle ownership. So I'm looking for some innovative business models, not necessarily technology, because Tesla is here, Waymo is here, several companies are here that can do autonomous driving. But what are the different business models? Because when Airbnb came, VRBO was already there, but Airbnb was still uh, a successful venture. Like when taxis were there, Uber came successful. So, what would be the next thing for mobility is an area that I'm keen. So, education space and mobility.
Very interesting. Um, Again, this is probably super helpful for young viewers who are just starting their career, right? So, looking back at your own career, so if you want to kind of give advice to your younger self, what would that be? I mean,
That's a
especially
great
this is very
question.
challenging
Awesome.
time for many people who are graduating right now.
My younger version won't listen to me. So I have a son who doesn't. So,
Yeah.
so it's a very good question. All your questions are very well framed. So learn to fall in love with the problem, right? Not your solution. My younger self, topper in school, everything was like, fortunately, those are not something I created. It was gift from God, right? If you believe in one. So I was gifted, right? Dreaming up innovative technologies, elegant systems, filing notebooks with ideas for about 80 and 90 patents. I was often solving problems that weren't urgent or creating solutions disconnected from real world constraints, right?
Yeah.
So if I have to go back and tell my younger one, right, true innovation actually emerges from deep immersion in how people and businesses actually work.
Yeah.
I'd spend less time imagining the future, right, and more observing and the daily challenges that people go through, and shift from solution first to problem first thinking would have transformed my career trajectory personally, right?
Yeah.
That's what I feel. That's what I would have done.
Great. Great. I mean, they
Those
say,
patents became like intellectual records,
yeah.
but like if you Google again, you will see at least like 15 awarded patents and about 90 or so filed patents. I continue to file patents, but those are all intellectual records gathering digital dust. So the gap between the invention and the impact is crossed by understanding human needs or organizational dynamics and system constraints.
Yeah.
So the greatest satisfaction to me these at this age comes not from being the smartest person with the cleverest idea, but creating something that materially improves people's lives or work.
Great, great. And they often say that, like, the successful people generally hold two opposing ideas in their mind, right? So, uh, and it seems to me that, like, you are one of them. So, is there any unconventional belief that you hold that often challenges you, or like, or probably where you encourage others to kind of disagree with you in some manner?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, from a technology perspective, you can go to any of the conferences I've been to. You can listen to my videos on YouTube, or otherwise, you can talk to people who attended those conferences when it's not recorded.
Yeah.
I'd say one thing: the best technology is completely invisible.
Hmm.
So, when it truly works, people don't even notice it. Take
Hmm.
your internet, for example. Do you care? No,
No. Yeah.
right? It works, right? When you turn on, your machine comes on. You don't care. It works.
Yeah.
When things are visible, then there is a problem. That means the best technologies needs to be invisible. That people don't agree with me on that one.
Hmm.
And similarly, on the leadership style, the best leaders are visible precisely when there is trouble,
Hmm.
yet invisible when everything is working well. So this is counter to how we design and celebrate technology. We obsess over interfaces
Hmm.
and making systems the center of attention, right? But truly transformative technology disappears into the background, right? While silently delivering tremendous value. Right? That's how I feel, right? The parallel leadership philosophy is great leaders are like orchestra conductors, highly visible when guidance is needed, but stepping back when things flow well. Both invisible technology and balanced leadership required genuine humility. I did not have it when I was young. I'll be the first to admit it. The willingness to have your work go unrecognized during success while absorbing pressure doing challenges is a beautiful thing. But a lot of people don't agree, right? Because why are we working? We're working to be recognized. I don't agree with that, but hey,
Great, great. So, finally, like, what's a book or an idea or person outside of the technology that has deeply influenced you and you would recommend, for our audience to kind of go listen or
so
read something like that?
yeah, I mean, if you are into physics, you should read this book, Frido Capra's The Tao of Physics.
Yeah,
It transformed profoundly my approach to innovation, right?
yeah, I just have it here on my desk.
That's cool. That's cool. So during a, I mean, it's connecting theoretical computer science with practical applications. What captivated me, especially in that one, was the breakthrough thinking
Right.
that happens at the intersection of seemingly unrelated disciplines, right?
Yeah.
Demonstrating how transformative insights often come from recognizing patterns between disparate fields,
Mm.
right? If you think about like one of the things we just talked about the mycelium network,
Right.
right? You look at truly how forests are created and how they sustain themselves, and
Right.
then now start to look at it and say, what the hell are we doing in our supply chain networking, right?
Right.
Why are we not looking at that saying, hey, let the node that has the want or need communicate through a network? That means it's better and it is distributed. There's no central. That's one of the things that you learn about it when you read about mycelium network. There is no central authority.
Mm.
It just everybody is a node. Someone has surplus, somebody has less. So it starts to distribute between them, right? So
Mm.
when you start to recognize things like that,
Yeah.
yeah, there is a cool name called biomimicry. But when you start to learn things in different, in comparing, I mean, bridging between disparate fields, so that's that book actually was the one that triggered me to start thinking differently like that. It became a cornerstone of my approach when struggling. So if you're looking at I mean, whether it is patient flow, when the first time I got introduced to a big project in healthcare was MD Anderson, they were looking at, hey, what is the best way to organize, right? Because patients are not satisfied. They come there for 3 days, and buildings, because how MD Anderson grew, the buildings were like in multiple places.
Yeah.
That means for a patient coming in for, because it's the most advanced cancer center in the world, and patients come there, they have to do certain lab tests, certain human nurse coordination, certain observations, and then go back to get their treatment. So between that, they have to cross like 5 buildings and 16 different rooms, and there is no flow, right? Nobody is there to guide them because obviously the hospital also had constraints about staffing. So you think about those things, those kind of problem. Now you study fluid dynamics. Now borrow concepts from a self-regulating system to reduce the wait time here.
Right.
When you design like resistant cloud architecture, similarly you can say ecological systems. Look at how forest responds to wildfires, right? Leading to a multi-region design maintaining 99.99% uptime during major disruptions.
Yeah.
So the book taught me how to be omnivorous, right? Studying biology, economics, psychology with the same intensity as technology, right?
Right.
I want to say I pretend to understand a lot about the biology. I mean, economics and psychology are a little bit more, if you're smart enough, you can just at least grasp
Yeah.
concepts, right? But biology is a little intense. If you, one of the most recent books I read is called The Catalyst. You can Google it up. I mean, it's
Okay.
phenomenal how RNA is the center of everything, not the DNA, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. So, for example, DNA is like hardware switch, like we said, because on its own it doesn't do anything. So RNA is the one that actually transfers everything from, because the transfer RNA is the one that takes the genomic codes and makes everything else happen, right?
Right. Right.
It takes it to a factory that produces your limbs, it produces your cells for uh, anything that you do, right? Or so if you read that book, then you will understand a lot about how. I mean, the catalyst is RNA, so that's what the theme is. This book, The Tao of Physics, made me become little omnivorous. That means I'm studying biology, I'm studying economics. So I always talk about, like, from a politics side, hey, what is the difference between the economic principles between Republicans and Democrats? Like Keynesian, if you read about them, smaller government, bigger government. So you learn a lot of things from these things, and now start to apply some of that stuff in how we build technology, right? The principle of least waste. I mean, when you're trying to dispense drugs in a specialty, so how would you compute that? I mean, linear programming. Where did that concept come from? You look at economics, that's where it came from. So
Right.
that way, this is it's creating environments where cross-disciplinary connections are expected. I mean, I would recommend everybody to read that book once.
Awesome. Ravi, it's been my pleasure to kind of speak to you. I think at least I have grown richer in terms of like the insights that you have provided in the last 1 hour or so. So I'm really deeply indebted and grateful for sparing this precious time of yours with me, and I'm sure our audience also would love this conversation. Again, thank you so much for being here. I really
Hey, thank you very much, Harry. Appreciate you having me.
thank you, sir.